There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Alex from Hamilton and of the famous bookish podcast, the Hamilton Review of Books podcast, is joining us again. Alex, hello.
Hello, how's it going?
It's great, and I'm so glad to have you here, and especially because, not only because, but especially because you're going to be enlightening us about one of the buzziest books on the lit fic scene these days, Nightcrawling by Leila
Mottley.
By Leila Mottley. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, definitely the it book this summer in literary fiction. It's I think it has the Oprah sticker. Does yours have the Oprah sticker? Yeah.
Yes, it does.
And,
yes, it does.
And she appeared. Mottley appeared on the Daily Show, and then it gets longlisted for the Booker Prize. And I think one of the reasons that it is such an it book, aside from the quality of the prose and the story that's being told, is that Mottley wrote this book when she was 17. And it's like totally like you want to feel like your life has been a failure. It's like, here it is. So she, it was published before she turned 20, and she's just 20 now. And and she's the youngest author to ever be longlisted for the Booker. I guess, it's a mixed blessing, I'm sure, because it probably puts a lot of pressure on her moving forward. But at the same time, reading it and thinking about how I was a writer when I was that age and seeing like the quality of writing that she's putting together. I think she's a bit of a young phenom. I think she was San Francisco's poet laureate or Oakland's poet laureate at some point when she was like 15 or 16. She had written 2 books that are unpublished, I guess, in her teens. So she was, developing her skill. It's like, can you imagine being her high school English teacher and seeing that stuff being turned in? So I think that's obviously given it some of its cachet and the attention it's drawn. But the actual book was amazing.
Just before we get into what the book's actually about,
yeah,
did you see the Zoom chat where Oprah suddenly appeared and told Leila Mottley that she had been chosen?
I have not, but I'm going to look it up now.
It's to die for. It's just so sweet. So
yeah, no, I can imagine.
I actually do not have the foggiest idea what this book is about. Please tell me.
So it's based on some real circumstances. So I think in 2016, it was exposed that the Oakland police were sexually trafficking underage girls. In Mottley's interviews, she talks about how at that point there was big concern with what that would mean with police community relationships. And for her, it's like, what about this girl or girls? I'm not sure how many there were, and what's going through her and the attention that's being paid to her situation. So she wanted to provide an account from this girl's perspective. I don't think it's based on any like research of the actual woman involved, but it's definitely trying to get a sense of what would someone in those circumstances be processing and what experiences they would have.
I had no idea it was so heavy, but I guess I should.
It is heavy. Yeah. And the other thing, it takes place in Oakland, and Oakland is a traditionally like African American city. It was the home of the emergence of the Black Panthers. A lot of like very prominent Black personalities come out of Oakland in the 1960s and 1970s. And just like the entire Bay Area with the tech boom, you could imagine all the changes that are going on in cities like Oakland, gentrifying, housing prices going up, people, working class Black communities kind of getting pushed out or facing the tension of trying to survive in a city that's becoming unaffordable. So that's kind of the context that the story takes place in. The main character is Kiara, and the story is told solely from her perspective. It's a first person narrative. Her brother Marcus is another character who's important, and her parents are there peripherally, but it's her story. And because of the kinds of pressures that I mentioned, that the changing Oakland and family tragedies, she finds herself pushed into sex work. as a way of trying to pay the rent and take care of her family. And it's in this context that she has a run-in with the police, and then who effectively blackmail her to sexually trade her among themselves. And then a bunch of things happens around that. The story is well known. It was nationally covered. I don't remember it, but it was nationally covered when it happened. That's the background of what occurs.
She's described as young. How young is she? Is she high school age or?
Well, when it starts, she's 16.
Oh.
And so it takes place over a couple of years. So she does become I guess a legal adult by the time it ends. But in terms of when all the crimes are being committed, she's a minor.
Do you think it's going to win?
The Booker? No, it's probably like first time novelists rarely win the Booker or most prizes like that. I think Shuggie Bain did, but that was a weaker year, I would argue, in terms of the Booker. But they usually, like, I personally at this point, I've only read 5.5 of the books. I would put it on my short list right now. Yeah. But I don't think, the Booker likes to award books that do a little more with form and are a little more creative in style in that way. And this book doesn't do that. It's a more straightforward narrative, emotionally gripping. But it's not a traditional Booker book.
So it sounds like I might really like it.
No, for sure. Like right. Yeah.
Sounds like I will love it. Why did you love this novel so much? What were its strengths?
So I found the writing was gorgeous, and I know some people have suggested that the writing is overdone, and I want to respond to that, but I just found it super controlled. It was filled with emotion. If you like a book that highlights voice and really get a sense of how that individual and that first person is trying to express in words, this is right up your alley if you're looking for something like that. And so I think people have become too accustomed to spare prose, the Sally Rooney's and whatnot, and that's fine. I think spare prose is great as well. But different people have different stylistic desires when they're writing, right? And I found the writing to be plush, like it's filled with detail, but it didn't feel out of date or too ornate. It just felt right in terms of capturing the kinds of moods that a woman of this age would be expressing and how she's trying to understand and describe the world that she finds herself in. So I love the writing. I also like the unique perspective that it brought, and she talks about this in some of her interviews. This book takes place in the background of the police violence we've witnessed and see at least the attention it's been getting and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think one of the things that she has noted is that often Black male perspectives and experiences get privileged in some of the accounts of what's going on, and Black women perspectives kind of get not completely ignored, but don't necessarily get the attention they deserve. And she really wanted to turn her eye and her focus on that experience. And I think that really is it's a unique contribution. I think last year the book, the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, tried to do a similar kind of thing. I think, and I know people might not agree with me, but I think this one does it better.
You haven't finished the sentence yet, but I already agree with you. Please continue. Yeah,
this was and it's the author of Du Bois, the Du Bois book I have all sorts of criticisms, but I'm not going to go into detail there. She's a much more experienced writer than Mottley. I thought Mottley had a more controlled narrative. It's much shorter, as you can tell, and it gets to the point a lot quicker. And it's filled with almost an immediacy. And I think that's the most powerful thing. It's like it feels like this is in the moment. This is the kind of angry, desperate situation that a lot of people are finding themselves in the United States, and it's almost screaming out in that way. It's filled with that kind of energy, and I found the Du Bois books had moments of that, but it was inconsistent.
Here on that one, but oh my God, you have totally. I mean, I was already sold, Alex, and now I don't think I have to start reading it right as soon as I hang up.
Yeah,
it really sounds amazing. I wonder, do you know if it's on audio? I bet it would be amazing.
It is. I listened to it in audio, I have to say, and it was great. It's a great narrator, and it works really well. And maybe the people who have found the writing too much, I think maybe reading it on the page felt too much, but in terms of audio, it fit perfectly well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing this video.
Leah from New South Wales in Australia is back. Hello, Leah.
Hello.
We're here to talk about the good stuff you're reading, and this is a debut American novel, just came out in early August. All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Mathews. You have some thoughts about it, mostly positive. Mm-hmm. Tell us about this book.
It's sort of a coming of age type story. It starts in 2012 in America, set in Milwaukee. So it's around the time where Obama has come into his second term and America's kind of coming out of a recession. So its employment is a bit difficult for young people coming out of college, which is our main character, Sneha. She's 22. She's just fresh out of college. She's looking for a job. She finds one in Milwaukee. There's sort of a bit of pressure on her to do well in this job because her parents are back in India. She's trying to support them. And she's also wanting to work for a few years to get a visa so she can become a permanent resident in America. But also being in America away from her family, her relationships, her friendships are also really important to her. So,
and I believe she starts to make some new connections in America.
She does, yes. So she's new to Milwaukee, so this job makes her move there. So she's sort of on the dating apps actually looking for a relationship. Doesn't have a lot of luck, so she decides to look more for friendship. So she meets a person called Tig, and they become really good friends.
You're going to take as a woman, right?
Yes.
Or is there any, maybe I shouldn't be so presumptuous as to say that it's a woman, but
when Sneha meets Tig, she's identifying as a woman, but then as the book goes on, they become more gender neutral. So they take on the they, them pronouns, which sort of becomes a little bit of an issue for Sneha to begin with.
And our protagonist is Sneha, right?
Sneha is a protagonist, yes.
Okay, yeah. So there's some queer goings on, and without going into any spoilers whatsoever, how does that affect Sneha, our protagonist?
So another person, she sort of has a couple of run-ins with, in real life and also online, this woman called Marina. They fall in love. She's a little bit elusive to begin with before anything happens there.
Marina is?
Yes.
Elusive,
Marina yeah.
And is this a new sexual queer exploration for our protagonist?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
So I know you had a few reservations, so we'll get into those in a minute. Would you say this is more a character-driven novel or plot-driven?
Definitely character-driven. The relationships are really key. And I think given the history of Sneha's background, there's a whole drama about why her parents are back in India. There's things that have happened in her past which makes, the intimacy and the vulnerability really difficult for her. So I'd say that's a key aspect of the story as well, with these relationships of letting people in, asking for help, being vulnerable, that sort of thing.
I've seen quite a few reviews, including a write-up in Vogue that talked about how great the writing was. Would you agree?
Definitely. I really, really loved the writing, especially the first half of the story. I thought there's just a really lot of subtle things happening in with the writing. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
This is a debut, and I think she had a short story that
won some award before this, but this is her first novel.
Mhm.
And she herself grew up both in Oman and in India and came to the States when she was 17. Anything else that you really liked or loved about the novel before we get into the other part?
I really loved the relationship aspect of it. I really loved the friendship between Tig and Sneha the most. I just thought that was just really well written and a little bit heartwarming as well. So yeah, I think that was my favorite part of the story.
And this was a 4-star book for you, so you mostly liked it, but there were some things that didn't work for you. What were they?
It just felt like there were a few too many social issues that were trying to be added into the story, especially towards the last half. It almost felt like there were strong ideas in there, but in the first half, the ideas and the themes really well woven in through the writing, and the
Perfect way
second
to
half
say
was a little bit more clumsy with adding that.
Where it felt like an Oprah episode of Oprah or something.
Kind of, and a couple of things almost veered on the melodramatic as well, I think. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like typical debut novel flaws.
Yes.
Debut novelists tend to pack too much in and can't weave, to use that verb, which I think is a powerful verb to talk about shapely work of fiction, can't weave it all into the storyline or into the characters. So it gets kind of tacked on and makes the novel feel bloated and kind of social worky.
Yes, and it didn't really put me off that much. Like, if Sarah Thankam Mathews writes a second book, I will definitely read it again because I really do love her writing.
Leah, thanks so much for telling us about it.
No problem. Thank you for having me on again.
This is very exciting. I have a brand new guest, and my first ever guest who is Syrian, and my first ever guest who's living in Turkey. This is Samuel. Samuel, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Sean.
Oh, great to meet you. We are Goodreads friends, and I was so glad when you said yes. And I can't believe how clear the Zoom connection is between us today.
I'm glad it's like there's no breakup or anything, so that's good.
You are a reader of literary fiction. You have great taste in books, as far as I'm concerned. And you are here to talk about a novel by the American novelist Alice McDermott. And the novel is called Someone. You loved it. Tell us about how the novel opens.
I loved it very much. I think it's one of the standouts so far this year for me. Yep, and I've read like 20 books this year, so it's one of the few standouts for me this year that I know it's gonna stay with me for a long time. It opens with the protagonist, Marie. She's like the daughter of a small family who lives in New York, and she meets her next door neighbor in the apartment building. It's like quite the unexpected meet, and it kicks off the story, which is a very quite like concise and small story, but it's told with a lot of heart.
And who is this next door neighbor?
She's from Syria, of all places.
Yes, yeah, and you didn't know that going in.
An immigrant. Yeah, which is not the reason I picked up this book, but it was a pleasant surprise nonetheless.
And so Marie she is a child at this time, and the neighbor, her name is Pegeen.
Yep.
She's roughly how old?
I'm not sure how old, but I'm guessing she's in her early 20s because she's coming back from the city, from the metro station. So she's working.
So she's an adult. So they have this kind of unusual encounter, and then what happens next at the very beginning of the story?
It's just like a quick chat. Then Pegeen falls on the stairs, and Marie helps her clean her coat because after the fall, it got a little dusty.
And that brief encounter seems to have quite an effect on Marie for the rest of her life. Would that be fair to say?
That would be fair to say, yep, without spoiling anything.
Right.
Although it doesn't play like a major role as you'd expect, but it leaves quite its mark on the protagonist.
Yeah. And then we follow Marie for the rest of the novel and her life.
Yeah, her family dynamic, her brother, who is like very bright at school, studying to become a priest. Her family is quite religious. We see her dynamic with her father and mother and their interactions. It's all very like sweet and told like with beautiful prose. Yeah.
That originating incident, the encounter between Marie as a child and the 20-something Pegeen, this is before World War II.
Yep, basically, yep.
And then the story comes up pretty much to the present, or?
I guess in a way, yeah, but not really. We're gonna have to read it to find out.
Okay, very interesting. I love that little tantalizing.
It flashes forward quite a lot, and yeah, it is close to present day. Like,
it sounds like a book that I would like. Why did you love it so much, Samuel?
I loved it because I didn't expect it to affect me like that in that deep way. It's like it really came out of left field, as they say.
Yeah.
And it really packs quite an emotional punch. I think I said that in my review. And yeah, it's made me well up quite a few places, and very few books do that to me. It's because you could tell it's like she wrote it with a lot of heart.
Alice McDermott is a writer that I have never read. Had you read anything by her before?
I have not.
I have never read her either. But when I look at my Goodreads friends, I see that most of them also really liked this novel. Although I do also see some less favorable reviews. So this might be a bit of a Marmite book. A book that some people love and other people. Yeah, interesting.
I only have positive things to say about it. As I said, it was like.
Sounds like it was you had an emotional connection with the story.
Yeah, I don't know why the parts with the mother and her parents and all the grief, like really, I connected with that a lot, even though I haven't experienced something like that personally. It was poignant. Yeah, it was really the language and the way it was written.
Definitely sounds like a Sean book. Samuel book and a Sean book.
I definitely recommend it. I think you're gonna like it quite a lot.
Thank you for telling us about the book. I hope you'll come back.
I if you'll have me, I sure will.
The fabulous Bill is back, and Bill is so widely read and reads so much great fiction from all over the world. But so I think this is maybe the first time that we're actually going to be talking about a novel from Kenya, where he lives in Nairobi. Hello again, Bill.
Hi, Sean.
This is a 2021 novel called And This Is How to Stay Alive. By Shingai, Njeri, Kagunda.
Kagunda, yes.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Oh, yeah. It's a lovely book. And the fact that I met the author personally made the reading experience more impactful, I think. And she was lovely enough to share experience of the writing process and how the book came about. And funny enough, when I met her the first time, she was just going to Brown, like university. And now, years later, she came back and she's like, Bill, I published a book and I would love for you to read it. And I was like, of course. And the book deals with themes that hit very close to home. In that they describe the Kenyan food and you can see Kenyan parents, like how they react and how complex their relationships are, rooted in like African culture, and trying to bridge that gap, especially with the kids too. And it was so honest in it. And because it deals with suicide, it follows the sister whose brother suddenly committed suicide. And during this grieving period, she finds out that she can transport when her emotions get heightened, I think. So she tries to go back in time to sort of rectify and find out what really caused the brother to reach that point. And so it's a novel of understanding more so than the suicide. And you find out the relationship between her and the brother and the small moments, how she was such a protector, like with her brother, and she felt like a failure. So yeah.
You know the author a bit personally.
Yes.
Is it at all autobiographical?
No, but I think the 2020 really got to her, because she was telling me about how she was dealing with a lot more, like COVID and distance from the family. So this was a way of bridging that gap for her, like, finding her roots and not feeling less lonely. And through writing, she sort of started healing. And we all lost, I think COVID-19 sort of touched everyone, and we lost someone, one or another, or multiple people. And that sort of made this book hard to read. Some sections are very, very punchy, and her writing is beautiful, but straight to the point, like straight to the heart, to punch you in the gut. Yeah, which I loved so much.
But wasn't necessarily an easy read in all places.
Yeah, yeah, but it has humor too, and the speculative part when the time travel happens, it's exciting, because you sort of want to find out why this is happening to her, why, if you're going with that expectation for the novel. But for me, I was just rooted in the atmosphere of an African family going through grief and zeroing it down, blame and all that. It's hard to read, yeah.
And did I understand from what we chatted about before that it's kind of queer story as well?
Yeah, there's also a queer, I think, yeah. There's also a queer, not to spoil, because it's such a short book.
Okay.
It's very hidden in how the brother interacts with the family, in the way he dresses or the way he acts. He's not fully himself. You can tell there's a barrier he's trying to cross throughout, in the way he plays with other boys and that sort of thing. And I read somewhere that queer people or anyone sort of looks for that undertone, if you're looking for that queerness, even in
subtext,
even in straight stories. Yeah, you just have to, you are always zoning in, like, is that queer? Is he hiding something? Yeah. But it's very clear here. And the way she uses that device to explore queerness in, like, being in the closet in an African family or African diaspora was spot on for me. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, it sounds powerful. And I have quite an allergy to speculative fiction. Do you think I might be able to cure it by reading this book?
Yes, you might. And it's so short, Sean. It's like, it's a novella. I read this in a day, in hours, actually. In one sitting. I just decided to give it my full attention.
Wonderful. And
that made it worth it. Like, it made the story more impactful. I'm glad it's not drawn out. I'm glad they gave it this size. It carries itself so well.
Sounds fantastic. So is the author back in Kenya permanently?
No, he's on both. I think he tiptoes between both. So whenever she's around, she just calls and we catch up and talk about books. And she's a very passionate reader. And she actually teaches writing too, like as an assignment for school. But so she gave me some tips on how to craft story, which was interesting. I love stories, yeah. When writers open up the process and show you how their brain works.
I'm just checking. So you have used a couple different pronouns.
Oh no. She's a woman.
Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted to...
When we were talking about it, it was a very open conversation. So there was no tug and pull. It was very open and very, yeah. When she talked about the character and talked about her life, and which queerness also always comes up in conversations around me. Like I love talking about queer books and all that. And she understands it because the way she presents those undertones in the book stellar.
This is reminding me a little bit about, oh God, now I'm going to blank on the author's name. A Black speculative fiction lesbian novelist who's no longer with us. Do you know who I mean?
Octavia. Is it
Octavia Butler.
Yes.
So
I wonder, Octavia Butler. Oh, she's prolific. I would actually want to go on that journey because those are, I think it's a rare, I haven't read a lot of Black lesbian speculative writers. Yeah.
Don't know if there's any others besides her. There must be, but her novel Kindred has a little bit of a similar premise in that the Black woman in 1976, the year of the bicentennial, she, you know, the premise, she
goes back in time and she's
conscious intention to, she goes back to her back into the lives of her ancestors during the era of slavery in the United States, and she keeps going back and forth without having any. Yeah,
you love it, and that I might read it. That sounds good. First of all, and it's a classic, and you know it's past time. Like
it's a bit of a Marmite.
So that sounds like
everybody loved it, but I did, and despite my allergy to speculative fiction, so no, I think this one might work for me too. Bill, as usual, grand slam. Thanks for telling us about this book.
Yeah, and everyone should read it. I think everyone should read it.
Interview out in time for the Kenyan Readathon, which happens on BookTube in September. So thanks so much, Bill.
Awesome.